Hello, and welcome to the second round of public consultation for the Grimsby Recreational Trails Master Plan. The purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the overall purpose of the Recreational Trails Master Plan, inform you of the technical steps and stages of the project and what has been completed so far, to generate an understanding of the process and considerations behind the development of the Trails Network and Master Plan, and to provide an overview of next steps. Today's presentation will cover the following information. We will start with a review of the plan process, the trail's vision, objectives, considerations, and the network development approach. After this, we will review some of the work that took place in Phase 1 and 2 that helped to inform the network development, including destinations and barriers for trails and the fieldwork conducted. We will end this section with a brief summary of our key takeaways. This will then lead into the trail network evaluation process, including a review into previously proposed trails, existing trails identified for improvements, and candidate route options. We will then present the proposed network we are looking for your feedback on. We will end this presentation with a discussion on our trail design guidelines and standards that will work with the proposed trail network to ensure that the trail network is designed well and meets the needs of different trail types throughout Grimsby. Currently, we are in the fifth phase of this study. At this stage, we have explored the relevant background information and have moved into confirming a proposed trail network and design guidance. We are hoping to present this information to you and get your feedback on what is being proposed before moving into the sixth and final phase of the study. During the previous round of engagement, we used the feedback received to help shape the proposed vision and objectives. The proposed vision for trails in Grimsby is that Grimsby will be a significant recreational destination in Ontario, providing residents and visitors with accessible active and passive trail opportunities. To help achieve this vision, we have identified 5 objectives as shown on the slide. Integrated, part of a connected and continuous transportation system. User-focused, prioritizes the comfort and safety of all users through design. Equitable, provides direct access to all and prioritizes high needs areas. Achievable, establishes feasible and actionable strategies and supportive tools. And lastly, maintainable, provides solutions that can be maintained and enhanced over time. Trails in Grimsby are centered around promoting and supporting recreational mobility. The ways to address recreational mobility are nuanced and varied depending on a range of factors. When considering how best to address and enhance recreational mobility within the town of Grimsby, consideration should be given to and questions posed around the 6 core factors shown on the slide. These considerations and questions are embedded into the master planning, design, and policy development process. In addition to these considerations, another approach is typically applied to ensure that the outcomes are context-considerate and specific. A key element of the current phase of work is the network development approach. Throughout the project, we have been exploring the existing and previously proposed conditions, examining barriers and trip generators, and scoping new trail opportunities, all of which fed into the proposed network you will see today. We look forward to receiving your feedback, which will ultimately help us as we move into phasing and prioritizing the different improvements. To help frame the network development approach and how we got to where we are today, we are going to review the key pieces of work completed in Phase 1 and 2. If you would like to review the maps of existing and previously proposed trails in Grimsby, please refer to the information posted online during the first round of engagement. The second key element of the network development approach is evaluating the trip generators or destinations that could increase trail use and the barriers to their connectivity. To help scope the different destinations, we have organized them into 3 groupings: primary, secondary, and tertiary, with their types, catchment, and design needs described on the slide. Primary destinations include schools, downtown, and any major public transit or major trailheads. Secondary destinations include community centers and visitor information centers. Tertiary destinations include any harbors and marinas, religious facilities, and Royal Canadian Legion locations. When mapped with the catchments, the destinations help to visualize key areas for trail development in Grimsby. Notably, the downtown is a cluster of destinations where increased trail connectivity could be prioritized. There are also many barriers within Grimsby that could inhibit the connectivity of the trail network. These barriers include major roadways, waterways, railways, and natural areas. This map helps to conceptually visualize how these barriers interact spatially in Grimsby. As noted, Grimsby is bound in the north by Lake Ontario, and 40 Mile Creek runs from the south through Grimsby north to Lake Ontario. Both the QEW and the CN rail corridors are barriers to north-south connectivity through the town. Finally, the south of the municipality is protected by the Niagara Escarpment Commission and Greenbelt, and is separated from the urban area by the escarpment, which reflects significant topographic change. All of these factors are important considerations when designing a trail network. The existing conditions, destinations, and barriers were vetted with fieldwork to identify trail opportunities. Two separate site visits were conducted with distinct purposes. The first site visit took place in October 2021 and focused on existing conditions of unopened road allowances, railway lines, and open spaces and parks throughout the municipality. The second site visit in March 2022 focused on exploring the potential trail opportunities, particularly around the 40 Mile Creek Trail and its potential for crossing the QEW. This map shows the locations visited during the first site visit in October 2021. This slide shows the accompanying photos taken at each location. Similarly, this map shows the locations visited during the second site visit in March of this year. And these are the accompanying photos taken during the site visit. Overall, the work completed in the first two phases of the study allowed us to understand neighborhood-specific conditions and priorities and begin to outline key connections. Feel free to pause the presentation and spend some time on this slide to review the conceptual directions noted. The background and foundational work in Phase 1 and 2 has led us to the current phase of trail network evaluation and development. The network evaluation process has been organized into 8 steps. Step 1, review applicability of previously planned trail improvements. Step 2, identify locations in the existing network where improvements are needed. Step 3, identify and evaluate new candidate trail routes. Step 4, confirm preferred routes in a proposed network. Step 5, introduce proposed trail classification approach. Step 6, confirm locations for trailhead improvements and new trailheads. Step 7, explore signage and wayfinding alternatives as part of a wider network approach. And lastly, Step 8, propose criteria for prioritizing and phasing improvements. The first step of the network review was to determine which of the previously proposed routes from past plans would be carried forward in this Trails Master Plan. We've reviewed the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan, Waterfront Trail Master Plan, and the GO Station Secondary Plan, and are carrying forward alignments for the proposed Waterfront Trail, Preliminary Nature Trail, and multi-use path from the GO Station. We also received and reviewed a series of additional proposals that were not Council approved. Each of these proposals were thoughtfully considered and shall be discussed in our candidate route options and proposed network section. In addition to the previously proposed routes, we also identified existing trail routes that would be proposed for condition improvements through the Trails Master Plan. Based on the fieldwork and existing conditions review, the 40 Mile Creek Trail, On-Road Waterfront Trail, and Bruce Trail have been identified for improvements. We then explored a series of different candidate route options which could support new trail development. Specifically, 4 different land types were flagged in our initial review as locations for new trail development. These land types included unopened road allowances, parks and open spaces, railway lands, and easements. Each of their preliminary opportunities and challenges are noted on this slide. In the following 8 slides, we go into more detail on each through a preliminary feasibility assessment. The first candidate route options are unopened road allowances. As shown on the adjacent map, of the 87 kilometers of unopened road allowance in Grimsby, many are located in the south of the municipality. Our fieldwork allowed us to review the conditions of these unopened road allowances, and it was found that there are generally 3 types: cleared, overgrown, and encroached. Cleared, unopened road allowances are the most viable option to be explored in this plan. Additionally, overgrown, unopened road allowances will also be explored, but will be subject to review to evaluate environmental impacts. At this time, any encroached, unopened road allowances will not be explored as potential trail routes. The second option is parks and open spaces. The town of Grimsby has over 60 local parks, and some have been previously identified for new improvements, such as new park paths. These improvements are noted conceptually within the proposed network. Additional connectivity has also been explored using town-owned lands which allow for connectivity north-south. This will also be noted on the proposed network map. Thirdly, railway lands were explored as an opportunity for future trail connection. We noted that there was significant interest within our first round of engagement to exploring the CN railway lands as an east-west trail connector through Grimsby. In order to properly understand the feasibility of this option, we explored the context and conditions of the railway line, railway lands, and the precedence of rails with trails. The CN Grimsby subdivision is a Class 1 railway line averaging 6 trains a day, traveling at speeds near 65 miles per hour. A desktop review was conducted to measure the available space within the CN right-of-way on the south side of the tracks. It was found that there is approximately 14 to 30 meters of clearance along the entire rail corridor. This review also noted some evidence of abutting resident encroachment. Finally, research was conducted to understand the precedent of rails with trails across North America. This review found that trails are not recommended within Class 1 rail right-of-ways, and that if no other option is available, any trails within these corridors are subject to a corridor-specific setback. This setback is based on factors such as train frequency, speed, type of freight transported, current and future rail maintenance and operational needs, track curvature, topography, and other environmental and physical constraints. These setbacks are only permitted if the railway landowners allow. Additionally, any new at-grade crossings are strongly discouraged. It's important to note that rails with trails are distinct from rail trails that typically run along unused rail corridors. Rails with trails share the space with an active rail line, and although there is a growing interest in this trail type, they require careful consideration into safety. At this time, the town is exploring the feasibility of a rail with trail and grade-separated crossing of the railway line. Preliminary meetings with CN have noted that further analysis is required to confirm feasibility. The town may continue to explore this option, but the following constraints are noted. Firstly, any new trail development will likely require land acquisition from CN. Secondly, given the space within the right-of-way, many segments along the corridor are constrained and would not have adequate space for the potential setback. Given these constraints, there may only be strategic locations along the corridor that could support a rail with trail option. Lastly, easements were reviewed as part of the candidate route options. Based on this review, it was found that given the current use of easements, few are viable for new trail connections. Easements have only been explored for strategic connections, and any trails proposed along them are subject to further validation. Another key element of the plan, and an important piece of feedback we received during the first round of engagement, is the location for the escarpment stairs. 2 locations are being proposed. The first is located at the base of Centennial Park and uses the town-owned land as the candidate route option. The second is located at the base of Baker Road and uses an unopened road allowance adjacent to publicly owned land. We hope to hear your feedback on which option is preferred, as it will help our decision-making process in forming the final recommendations. Through the exploration of the previously planned routes, improvements to existing trails, and candidate route options, we have formed a proposed network. Coming to this network that will be presented was an iterative process wherein different candidate routes were explored for their opportunity and overall benefit to the objectives of this plan, as well as considering their feasibility. You will see the network explained on 2 maps. Each proposed improvement is numbered, and the maps are followed by a legend which lists each numbered improvement. We invite you to review these maps in more detail and at your own pace by pausing this presentation. This map shows the entire municipality and highlights a new east-west trail connection using unopened road allowances in the south. This map shows the urban area boundary and the proposed trail network within. As mentioned, feel free to explore this information in more detail by pausing this presentation or downloading the static PDF package from the study website. In this section, we will present an overview of the proposed trail design standards and guidelines. The purpose of trail design standards and guidelines is to complement the Recreational Trails Master Plan, guide the approach used for designing, building, and maintaining trails and signage, guide consistency across the entire trail system and municipality, and use best practices for creating and managing safe, enjoyable, and accessible trail experiences. The components of standards and guidelines are trail classifications, amenities, trailheads, crossings, and sign classifications. Developing a trails classification is a major piece in trail standards and guidelines. A trail classification system defines different types of trails, functions, users, and user experiences, represents current as well as future trail goals and demands within a municipality, reflects the needs and vision, assists users in making appropriate choices for their abilities and desired experiences, clearly articulates permissions and restrictions to users, and guides implementation, prioritization, design, signage, and amenity provision, maintenance, and enforcement. We're proposing 5 types or classes of trails for Grimsby. They include urban destination trails, community neighborhood trails and pathways, natural surface and nature trails, informal and rural trails, and on-road links. The next few slides present further details about each trail class. The final master plan will contain a more fulsome description and table comparing the trail classes. Class 1 type is urban destination trails. They are usually short, easy distances with 3 to 4 meter widths, hard surfaces, and minimal slopes to make them more accessible and appealing to users of all ages and abilities. A good example would be Grimsby's Waterfront Trail. They may also be located in key destination parks or areas where higher volumes of users are expected. To support the variety of users, a full range of amenities may be provided, such as parking, trailheads, seating, toilets, signage, and waste bins. Class 2 type are community and neighborhood trails and pathways. They are also usually short, easy distances with 3-meter widths, hard or compacted surfaces, and minimal slopes to make them more accessible and appealing to all ages and abilities. A good example would be the Hickory Crescent to Willow Lane Trail or the 40 Mile Creek Side Trail. They may also be located across parklands and in community facilities. To support the variety of users, a range of amenities may be provided, such as parking, seating, toilets, signage, and waste bins. Class 3 type are natural surface or nature trails. These trails typically range in distance, not usually more than 15 kilometers, have narrow widths and natural surfaces that respond to the topography. They may also include purpose-built trails, for example mountain biking trails. They are more moderate to difficult to use and often have barriers making them non-accessible. A representative trail would be the 40 Mile Creek Trail. These types of trails are commonly located in open spaces and environmental protection areas. Parking, seating, signage, and waste bins are typical amenities found on these types of trails. Class 4 type trails, or informal trails, range in distance and are usually not more than 10 kilometers. These trails have variable widths and conditions that reflect the topography. They are more moderate to use and in some cases may have barriers making their accessibility site-specific. These types of trails would leverage unopened road allowances. A representative example would be the unopened road allowance at Always Road and Kemp Road West. Amenities for this trail type would need to be determined based on user frequency, behavior, and the nearby land uses or development plans by the town. To build connectivity within a municipal trail network that promotes recreational mobility is Class 5 type or on-road links. These trails are in the road right-of-way, so typically follow the road profile. They would unlikely exceed 10 kilometers. Their widths vary as they could be sidewalks, multi-use paths, cycling facilities, and on-road sections of the Bruce Trail. We've given them a moderate to difficult user rating because of the variability in road and traffic conditions that may make some of these links less friendly to less experienced on-road users. For example, a trail could connect to an on-road cycling lane that requires greater experience cycling on roads. These types of trails would include any active transportation on road routes, as well as on-road segments of the waterfront trail. Amenities for this trail type would need to be determined based on needs and could be planned through development and road upgrades to include seating, signage, and bins in particular. In addition to the proposed system of trail classifications, we have also proposed 3 trailhead classes which range in amenities. Trailhead Class A provides the most amenities and will be targeted for major trails and key destinations. Class B offers some essential amenities such as benches, lighting, and signage, and is suited for minor trail connections. Trailhead Class C offers signage and has some additional optional amenities. This trailhead class will be prioritized for smaller or secondary entrances along key trails and in locations where space is constrained. The following slides show visualizations of the amenities that will be provided for each trailhead class. This visualization shows Trailhead Class A. This visualization shows Trailhead Class B and C. Another core component of standards and guidelines is the signage strategy. We're proposing that trail signage be developed as a branded family of signs. In general, the signage should articulate the user experience, set expectations, and identify the skills needed. This information is critical for safety and accessibility. The signs create an integrated wayfinding system between on- and off-road facilities, parks, and tourism. Some on-road regulation signage may be needed, and various standards apply here in Ontario. Overall, the signs bring coherence and consistency to parks and recreation and can add value to tourism. We've identified 8 types of signs as shown on this slide. They include on-road navigational, primary identification or trailhead signs, special purpose, on-trail and directional signage, regulatory signs, warning signs, and education or interpretive signs. The next 8 slides go into more detail about each sign type, what information they may include, and suggested locations and placement of signs. Despite the constraints, there are plenty of opportunities to develop a high-quality trails system across Grimsby, and the application of the proposed standards and guidelines would really pull all the pieces together. The question, of course, that follows is which improvements do you think are most pressing and when should they happen? So for that, we can look into developing criteria upon which to evaluate different trail improvements and projects. We're proposing 2 screens to make decisions. Screen 1 determines eligibility for inclusion in the Capital Improvement Program. This is where we ask if the projects contribute to the Recreational Trails Master Plan principles and objectives, resonate with community priorities, and match the needs of the Parks and Recreation System and Department. We suggest that improvements or projects must align with at least one principle and objective to move forward. Screen 2 prioritizes projects in the short, medium, and long term. Here we ask whether projects achieve multiple criteria such as safety, do they address gaps in the network or underserved areas, do they align with other municipal goals, is there funding, do they align with staffing and budget resources, are they quick and relatively easy to implement, or more long-term and complicated, do they require additional feasibility analysis, And lastly, do they deliver high value for the costs compared to other projects? In terms of what happens next, there are several steps upcoming. Through the engagement process, we will use your feedback to confirm or modify the proposed network, trail standards and guidelines, and develop design solutions for specific barriers. An implementation strategy will also be developed in which prioritization and phasing criteria will be established to identify trail projects into short, medium, and long-term projects. Once there is a clearer idea of the projects, we can generate cost estimates and tailor our recommendations for supportive policies and practices for Grimsby. For example, what kinds of maintenance and encouragement strategies would be suitable? Finally, the entire project culminates in the town of Grimsby's first recreational trails master plan. This report will be made available online towards the end of this summer.